Alright, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to start this lesson off by giving all the praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Honors to our brothers who are fervently preaching the word in sincerity and in faith. Shalom to all the sincere believers, which includes the scattered Israelites who are amongst these other nations and look like these other nations. Now, this lesson is going to be based on the latest attacks that have happened in this war between the U.S., Israel, and Iran. So through the Spirit, I'm going to read this article, give some precepts, and Lord's will you're edified. It says at least 12 U.S. troops hurt in Iranian strike on Saudi base, refueling planes damaged. The Wall Street Journal, citing U.S. and Saudi sources, reported an Iranian attack on Prince Sultan Air Base involving a ballistic missile and drones that damaged refueling aircraft and wounded troops, two of them critically. USS George H.W. Bush expected to deploy to region. It says at least 12 U.S. soldiers were wounded Friday night in an Iranian attack on Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, which also damaged U.S. military refueling aircraft. The Wall Street Journal reported overnight, citing U.S. and Saudi officials familiar with the details. According to the report, two of the wounded soldiers are in very serious condition. The officials said the injured personnel were inside a structure that was hit in the attack, which included the launch of at least one ballistic missile and several drones. The missile strike marked at least the second time Prince Sultan Air Base has been hit since the war began. In an earlier strike at the start of the war, 5 refueling aircraft were damaged. The Wall Street Journal also reported on that incident, prompting U.S. President Donald Trump to criticize the outlet, saying they want us to lose the war. And you see, that's the thing. On one hand, Trump is telling the American people that that the U.S. and Israel are winning the war. You know, they're decimating Iran and they're wiping out all their military and their leaders and all of this. But then on the other hand, you see the other side of it, because there's that old saying, there's two sides to every story. So on the other hand, you see that Iran, when they are launching their, defensive attacks, that they're doing a lot of damage to the Israeli military and, the U.S. soldiers as well. And, the Iranians are hitting U.S. military bases in the region. And like Apostle Tahar said in one of his latest videos, the soldiers from the U.S. that deploy over there to Western Asia, aka the Middle East, or vice versa, they're not coming back. So all the people that are, their husband, their wife, their son, their daughter, their best friend, that's going over there, they're not coming back. They're going to die over there. And as hard as that is to hear, that is the truth. And a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people are talking about pray for the soldiers. It's like, no, because they have no business going over there in the first place, except for the fact that the Lord is about to bring judgment upon them. So, continuing on in this article, it says, meanwhile, CBS News reported overnight, citing multiple sources, that the aircraft carrier USS George H.W. Bush will join the area of responsibility of U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, which is overseeing the war with Iran. The sources said the carrier could join combat operations after completing an exercise earlier this month and is now available for operational missions. It says 2 U.S. aircraft carriers are currently in the Middle East participating in the war with Iran: the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald R. Ford. It says earlier in March, U.S. reports said that George H.W. Bush, along with a strike group of 3 guided missile destroyers, would be deployed to the Middle East, though that has not yet occurred. Military analyst Ron Ben Yeshai noted at the time that one goal of sending a 3rd carrier to the region, beyond sustaining a prolonged campaign without overextending forces, would be to deter Yemen's Houthi rebels who have threatened to join the war, a possibility also raised by Iran. Yeah, so things are just escalating, you know. And this also just proves that the US and Israel are not winning this war, because they just keep sending more soldiers. They keep sending more aircraft carriers. It's like, hey, if you were overwhelmingly winning a war, you wouldn't need to keep sending more soldiers in. Esau is losing, and he doesn't want to admit it. But the evidence is speaking louder than his lies. Psalms 9:16. The Lord Yahweh is known by the judgment which he executeth. The wicked is snared in the work of his own hands. Higgaion Selah. And that's Salakia. The Heavenly Father is known by his judgments. And this war and all the death and the destruction and the injuries that have came from this war, that's the Lord's judgment upon these people. All the loved ones of these soldiers, whether they're Iranian, whether they're Israeli, or whether they're from the U.S., they're loved ones that have to deal with knowing that the soldiers are out there, getting wounded, getting killed. It's just a lot of mourning and weeping and sadness and heaviness. Like it says in James 4:9, be afflicted and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to heaviness. There's not a lot of people that are happy right now, because there's just a lot of death and a lot of destruction and a lot of chaos going on. Not just because of this war, but in a huge part because of this war. And this war has caused a lot more division as well. Because once again, you do have the people who are cheering on this war, the ignorant people, particularly here in the US, Trump's fan base, they're cheering on the war. But basically everybody else is against it, because everybody else is like, these soldiers are going out there and they're going to die to fight a war that they never should have been a part of, fighting on behalf of Israel, but claiming that they're doing it for America. But the U.S. would not be over there if it wasn't for Israel. So those soldiers are not going out there to die to protect the U.S. They're going out there to die protecting Israel. And if the shoe was on the other foot, those Israelis would not be willing to die for America. But there's too many ignorant Americans that don't understand that it's not a two-way street. U.S. soldiers die for Israel, but Israeli soldiers would not die for America. But this whole war is the Lord's war. He's the one who started this war, ultimately. Exodus 15:3, the Lord Yahweh is a man of war. The Lord Yahweh is his name, and that's right, the Heavenly Father is a man of war. And that's why this is taking place. And it's just going to continue to escalate. There will be no peace. There will be no peace talks. There will be no peace negotiations. This war is just going to keep going. These Iranians have no intention of slowing down on their defensive attacks. And Israel and the U.S. have no intention of slowing down on their attacks on Iran. So it's just going to continue to escalate. And the more destroyers and U.S. carriers, aircraft carriers that Trump sends over there, eventually, China and Russia on behalf of Iran are going to get involved. It's just escalating. And there's about to be a lot more injuries and a lot more deaths that take place. Deuteronomy 32:39. See now that I, even I am he, and there is no power with me. I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal. Neither is there any that can deliver out of my hand. And that's right. So all the civilians and all the soldiers that are getting wounded and killed, whether they be in Iran, Israel, whether they be these U.S. soldiers, whether they be civilians in any of the areas surrounding that region, who are getting basically caught in a crossfire, them getting wounded and killed, that's the judgment of the Lord being brought upon them. And like it says in Job 4:7, remember, I pray thee, whoever perished being innocent, or where were the righteous cut off? And the answer is, no one has perished being innocent. So all the people who die, whether they're civilians or soldiers, as a result of this war, they were not innocent, whether they be man, woman, or child. In verse 8 it says, even as I have seen, they that plow iniquity and sow wickedness reap the same. And that's right. So all the people who are dying as a result of this war, they are not innocent in the eyes of the Lord. And them dying is the Lord's judgment upon them. Ecclesiastes 3:1. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Jump down to verse 8. A time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. And we are without a doubt in a time of war. We are in World War III. It just hasn't gone full blown. Right now it's just between Iran, Israel, and the U.S. But it's going to escalate, and Russia's going to get involved, and China's going to get involved, and other nations are going to get involved, and it's going to very quickly become a full-fledged world war. And all the simple-minded people, in particular, these simple-minded Americans who can't see it and are busy cheering on this war, what they don't understand is that they're cheering on their loved ones dying, because their loved ones are not coming back. Anyone that gets deployed out there is not coming back. They're going to go out there and they're going to die out there. And that's just what it is. There is no getting out of this. There is no escaping it. And at the end of World War III, America and Israel are going to get nuked. America and Israel are going to get decimated by nuclear missiles. And that's what these simple-minded Americans don't understand. America is going to lose this war. You know, they want to sit here and brag and talk about how America has the best military and America is the greatest on earth and all of that. The U.S. soldiers are getting their butts handed to them out there. They're not winning a damn thing. And while the Lord is not necessarily on the side of these Iranians either, he is 100% against the U.S. and Israel. Those are the chief places of his anger. So all this pride and this arrogance that these Edomites in particular have, the Lord is about to burn that up. Quite literally. You know. So for all you sincere brothers and sisters, you know, just continue to watch and stay circumspect and prayed up and also rejoice, because the escalation that's happening with this war is just yet another sign that we are getting closer and closer to being up out of this wicked place. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up here. In closing, I want to give all the praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash, the Wadi Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, for putting the spirit on me to do this lesson. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Honors to all the brothers who are fervently preaching the word in sincerity and in faith, and shalom to all the sincere believers, which once again includes the scattered Israelites who are amongst these other nations and look like these other nations. Hope you all stay strong, stay safe, stay fervent, stay circumspect, stay prayed up, and Adawan Ratazah. Till next time, shalom.